Pain is one of the most critically acclaimed and compelling antagonists in all of fiction, a character that literally and physically embodied his own ideology. Even his appearance, all the Renegon rods piercing his body, were a design choice chosen by Kishimoto to emphasize the painful aspect of his character. Now there's a lot of reasons as to why he's such a popular villain, be that his stylish emo appearance, or his god complex, or even just his overwhelming powers. But in all honesty, I think the reason he's as popular as he is because of the speech he gives to Naruto when he has him pinned down. That moment was instrumental for Naruto's character growth. It made Naruto realize that the affairs of the world weren't as one-dimensional as he thought, that the Leaf weren't always the good guys, and had him question his entire ideology. So today, I'm going to be analyzing Pain's speech to Naruto, the cycle of hatred, how it is shockingly applicable to events that are currently unfolding in the real world as we speak, and what that tells us about Pain's philosophy and whether he was right all along and Naruto just had childish ideals. The reason Pain is such a successful villain is because of how realistic he comes off, or how his actions seem somewhat justified. So much so that he leaves Naruto speechless. Pain exposed the Leaf Village's dark past to Naruto, revealing that maybe they weren't the good guys all along. Maybe their well-being and success came at the cost of another nation. The Hidden Rain was one of the villages oppressed by the 5 great nations, and due to its unfortunate location, the rain was used as their battleground. According to Pain, the great nations instigated these wars to protect their national interests and profited from it. Of course, the Hidden Rain had to pay the price, and the small nation was constantly ravaged by war. Civilians had nowhere to go and usually got caught in the crossfire. Nowhere was safe, which led to a rise in the number of war orphans, born into a system that couldn't care for them due to the fact that it was so ravaged and devastated by all the conflicts. And Pain, or Nagato, was born amidst all the chaos. Nagato said that he had 2 moments define his greatest pain. The first was the loss of his parents, which is what made him an orphan in the first place. His parents were of the large civilian casualty caused by the war, and they were killed by Leaf Ninja. Nagato was lost at first after the death of his parents, but he eventually met Yahiko and Conan, 2 other war orphans. The only way for children born in this lawless land to survive was to band together, and soon enough, Yahiko would become a light for both Nagato and Conan. He may have not been the strongest, but Yahiko inspired hope. His courage and determination are the reason the trio was able to survive as long as they did. Nagato owed him his life, and Nagato would follow Yahiko's dream as his own. He followed them word for word.
World domination. World domination.
Of course, after Yahiko's death, Nagato abandoned all the childish ideals he used to have. He had to grow up. Yahiko said once that if all the pointless fighting didn't stop, he'd become a god and make it stop. And that line inspired Nagato. Yahiko also said that people can understand and sympathize with one another by experiencing the same pain. But what about those that refuse to acknowledge your pain? You think the 5 great nations care about the damage they caused the Hidden Rain? It was none of their concern. That is in part what encouraged Pain to carry out the assault against the Leaf Village. Maybe if they got to experience it firsthand, only then would they truly understand the horrors of war and gravitate towards peace. Those who do not understand true pain can never understand true peace. Pain is what happens when you take the oppressed and give them the power of a god. And now he was exposing the hypocrisy of the great nations. What about my friends, as he's speaking through the corpse of said friend? How is it fair for only you people to determine what's peace and justice? Pain is also very self-aware. He didn't have the entitled shallow view that he was the good guy and everyone that opposed him was bad. He said that everyone had their own form of justice, that justice is very different depending on which side you look at, and that his side, that of the impoverished, oppressed small nation, is one that's usually left unacknowledged. He also acknowledged that if one came to call vengeance justice, then that will only create further vengeance down the line and trigger a vicious cycle of hatred. A concept that's simple yet very complex to tackle, and one that exists in our real world as well. As long as each side pursued this vengeance, then the cycle will continue to be. And insurgent groups like the Akatsuki rise due to all the destabilization and the destruction caused by the years of oppression. And most of the times, the oppressor won't have any sympathy towards the oppressed if they were hit back with any sort of vengeance. They don't care what they did in the past. As far as they're concerned, they're just a victim. That's why Pain believed that human beings cannot understand each other, that everyone was only concerned with their own justice, that they'll just disregard their opponent's suffering. The two sides then become at odds with coexisting, and it leads to the annihilation of the side with the lower firepower. Pain gave Naruto a very real and complex problem, a problem that plagues our world too. There's just far too much hatred, and this hatred rules the world. Naruto didn't even know what to say to him, acknowledging that Tendo Pain was making some good points. Naruto saw his former teammate Sasuke transformed by the cycle of hatred, and finally understood him. But Naruto wasn't Sasuke. How would Naruto react to the cycle of hatred? That was a question that left the series writer Masashi Kishimoto himself in what he described as a difficult place. He says, and I quote, "I wondered if I just created a story about him, Naruto, going after and beating his opponent. What would kids think of that? I wanted to do it right, but I couldn't come up with an answer, so I couldn't sleep. Even when I could get to sleep, I'd snap awake with my shirt soaked with sweat, or I'd toss and turn. It was exhausting." End quote. Eventually, Kishimoto himself came to the conclusion that neither he nor the character Naruto can solve this problem. And I quote, "It wasn't a problem that could be solved easily. Because I was suffering, it's natural that the character suffers too. In the end, Naruto talked it out and decided to forgive his opponent. So Sasuke is a character who can't forgive, and Naruto is one who can." End quote. This is how you know Pain's speech was brilliant, when it's to the extent that it leaves the writer himself with insomnia due to not being able to answer said question. And you can't blame him, as the cycle of hatred is a very complex and real problem that mankind hasn't been able to answer to this day. The reason so many people praise Pain as a villain is because a lot of what he said was correct. Pain exposed the hypocrisy of the First World Order, hypocrisy that is more visible today than it's ever been. When you look at it from a political point of view, Pain's speech resonates with those who are under oppressive regimes, which is sadly the reality for many smaller nations. Their loss and pain is usually forgotten by the perpetrators, or deemed as necessary for the survival of the greater nation. And once some resistance rises from their lands, they're labeled as terrorists, just like the Akatsuki. And it's not that they don't perpetuate terror, but to label them as groups that commit senseless violence and that they're not the result of war and oppression is not only disingenuous, but also diminishes the suffering that they went through. Pain saw that the justice that the world claimed to uphold, it was only really upheld for a select few. As for the smaller nations, there was no justice. And going back to the conclusion that Pain arrived to, human beings simply cannot understand each other, and they never will. It seems like that may be the sad reality of the world. As long as there is a will of vengeance in the name of justice, as long as there is no accountability for all the destruction perpetuated by the great nations, then this monster known as hate will exist, and will only give rise to more pains. That's why Pain is considered a broken hero. To the leaf, sure, he was a bad guy, but to the rain, he was its savior from the endless conflicts that it suffered from. Pain's cycle of hatred can be seen unfolding in the real world as we speak. Of course, the situation's a lot more complicated in real life, and Pain's story is only similar or has its parallels. Obviously, it isn't fully accurate. However, one could say that Pain's speech was the accurate part, and Naruto's naivete and ideals were just that, ideals. Even the series author Masashi Kishimoto said that Naruto's approach to conflict was unrealistic and not very applicable to the real world. To give you the exact quote, "To be completely honest, overcoming traumatic experiences like Naruto did seems a bit idealist and naive to me, even though this kind of utopia idealism has to be written and defended in shonen manga, because shonen manga must carry hope above all." End quote. So even the writer himself low-key agreed with Pain. And Naruto Uzumaki himself was like a messiah. Most of the politicians of this world won't have a shred of sympathy that Naruto feels. Matter of fact, real politicians are a lot more similar to Danzo and the two elders, Koharu and Hamura, just corrupt geezers that couldn't care less about civilian casualties so long as they're furthering their political agenda. This isn't a political channel, so this is as far as I'll dive into it. But yeah, Pain's speech about the cycle of hatred is shockingly accurate. You can see live examples unfolding around us in real time, and the fact that Pain not only left the main character speechless, but had the author himself looking for the answer to complex philosophical questions makes him one of the best written villains of all time.